fastest way to command undeniable, terrifying respect in any hierarchy is to master the dark psychology of zero explanations. While the masses bleed their social status every single day by constantly begging for forgiveness and offering justifications to people who do not matter, untouchable individuals weaponize silence against social guilt. Listen to me very carefully, because the window of opportunity to build this impenetrable psychological armor is closing, and the cost of submission is total powerlessness. Every time someone challenges your decisions, questions your boundaries, or acts offended by your behavior, they are laying a Machiavellian trap. Society has conditioned you to believe that when someone demands an explanation, the polite and mature thing to do is to provide one. You have been taught that communication resolves conflict. But in the unforgiving dynamics of social power, this is a catastrophic lie designed to keep you at the bottom of the food chain. When a manipulator demands to know why you did something, they are not looking for information. They are testing your compliance. They are forcing you to step into a defensive frame. If you do not recognize how your desperate need to explain yourself is being weaponized against you today, you will spend the rest of your life as a docile subordinate, constantly justifying your existence to predators who feed on your insecurity. But if you stay until the very end of this classified briefing, I will reveal the exact psychological blueprint the elite use to shatter a manipulator's framework of control. You will learn why withholding explanations terrifies toxic individuals, and how deploying absolute, unyielding ice is the ultimate show of dominance. It is time to stop negotiating your right to exist. The asymmetry of justification. To understand why explaining yourself destroys your authority, we must dissect the invisible architecture of a social confrontation. Power is never static. It shifts based on who is setting the rules of the interaction. When a toxic individual confronts you, whether it is a coworker questioning your methods, a family member criticizing your lifestyle, or a manipulator acting theatrically hurt by your boundaries, they are attempting to establish dominance. They throw out an accusation or a demand for an apology, creating a sudden imbalance of power. At this exact moment, your conditioned response is to restore harmony. Because you hate the discomfort of being misunderstood, you immediately launch into a detailed explanation of your motives. You list your reasons. You soften your tone. You try to make them see your side of the story. You think you are being reasonable, but you have just committed a fatal tactical error. By offering an explanation, you have unconsciously accepted their premise that they have the authority to judge you. You have handed them the role of the judge, and you have willingly accepted the role of the defendant on trial. The person who demands the explanation holds the power. The person who provides the explanation is submitting to that power. It is a pure transfer of social leverage. Furthermore, you are falling victim to a twisted version of the reciprocity rule. The manipulator presents you with the uninvited gift of their disapproval. They manufacture a crisis out of thin air. Instead of rejecting this fake crisis, you feel obligated to reciprocate their aggressive engagement by offering pieces of your internal reality, your thoughts, your fears, your justifications. You are paying a debt you never owed. Untouchable operators understand that you cannot win a defensive war. The moment you start explaining why you are not a bad person, you have already lost the interaction, because you have validated their right to question your worth. The scarcity of words. How do the truly powerful maintain their untouchable status? They apply the principle of scarcity directly to their communication. We know from the psychology of influence that opportunities and items seem far more valuable to us when their availability is limited. A diamond is valuable because it is rare. Dirt is worthless because it is everywhere. The exact same Machiavellian principle applies to your words, your apologies, and your explanations. If you are constantly talking, constantly smoothing things over, constantly explaining every minor decision you make, your words become as cheap as dirt. People stop valuing your perspective because it is always available. You become predictable, harmless, and easy to manipulate. Historically, the most formidable figures of power understood that authority is intrinsically tied to the restriction of access. By saying less than necessary, you create a psychological void that other people are terrified of. When you restrict access to your inner thoughts, You trigger a deep sense of uncertainty in your opponents. When a social predator confronts you, expecting a flurry of nervous explanations, and you simply stare back at them in absolute silence, you deny them the raw material they need to attack you. Every explanation you give is a weakness they can exploit. Every justification is a crack in your armor where they can insert their leverage. But silence gives them nothing. It is a flawless, impenetrable surface. By making your words scarce, you immediately inflate their perceived value. When you refuse to explain yourself, you project an aura of supreme self-assurance. You send a chillingly clear message to the subconscious mind of the attacker. I do not require your approval, your understanding, or your permission. That level of scarcity is magnetic. It forces the other person to realize that they have zero control over your reality, leaving them grasping at shadows, while you remain solidly anchored in your own power. The perceptual contrast of silence. If you doubt the devastating effectiveness of this strategy, you must examine the psychology of perceptual contrast. Human beings do not judge things in a vacuum. We judge things by comparing them to what immediately preceded them or to what surrounds them. If you lift a light object and then a heavy one, the second object will feel significantly heavier than it actually is. Elite operators use this exact phenomenon to magnify their presence in a room. In any environment, a corporate boardroom, a chaotic family gathering, or a tense social interaction, the vast majority of people are operating from a place of anxiety. They are talking too fast, overreacting to slight insults, laughing nervously, and rushing to fill every moment of silence with meaningless noise. When you introduce absolute tactical silence into this environment of frantic noise, the perceptual contrast is staggering. Imagine a manipulator launching a dramatic, theatrical attack against you in front of an audience. They raise their voice, they point fingers, they demand to know how you could be so insensitive. The entire room holds its breath, expecting you to fight back, to defend yourself, or to break down and apologize. Instead, you do absolutely nothing. You do not flinch. You do not break eye contact. You simply let their words hang in the dead air. Against the backdrop of their hysterical performance, your chilling composure is magnified 100 times over. Because they are hot and erratic, your ice-cold apathy seems infinitely more powerful. The contrast principle ensures that your silence does not look like weakness or fear. It looks like the ultimate manifestation of control. You become a black hole that absorbs their chaotic energy without letting a single drop escape. By refusing to play their game, you expose their attack as a pathetic, desperate cry for attention, and you establish yourself as the only true authority in the room without lifting a single finger. Shattering the predator's framework. We must now look at exactly what happens inside the brain of a social predator when you deploy tactical apathy. Why does refusing to explain yourself terrify them so deeply? The answer lies in the human need for closure and the paralysis of uncertainty. Manipulators rely on a predictable script. They press a button, guilt, shame, accusation, and they expect a specific reaction, apology, justification, submission. Their entire framework of control depends on you reading your lines correctly. When you refuse to explain yourself, you tear up the script. You plunge their mind into a state of chaotic uncertainty. The human brain is wired to search for cause and effect. When someone treats us a certain way, we desperately need to know why. When a manipulator attacks you and you give them zero response, their brain short-circuits. There is no closure, no defense to argue against, no emotional reaction to feed on, just a terrifying, unyielding silence. This forces the manipulator into a state of pluralistic ignorance within their own mind. Because they cannot read your intentions, they begin to second-guess their own. Did you hear them? Are you secretly planning a counterattack? Do you know something they don't? The silence becomes an open wound in their psychology. Nature abhors a vacuum, and in social dynamics, the weaker person will always rush to fill the silence. Within seconds, the power dynamic violently reverses. To relieve the unbearable tension of your apathy, the attacker will start talking again. But this time, they will start explaining themselves. They will backtrack. They will soften their tone. They will offer unprompted concessions just to get you to react. By doing absolutely nothing, you force the enemy to defeat themselves. You watch them exhaust their energy and dismantle their own authority, all while you observe them with the clinical detachment of a scientist watching an insect in a jar. Forging the iron crown of dominance. The transformation from a docile subordinate to an untouchable operator requires a fundamental shift in your identity. You must actively forge the armor of indifference. This does not mean you become a sociopath who feels nothing. It means you develop an unshakable boundary regarding who is entitled to your internal reality. You must redefine the act of explanation. Moving forward, you must view every demand for an unwarranted apology not as a social obligation, but as a hostile compliance tactic. When you recognize that their fake outrage is merely a mechanical tool designed to extract your submission, you instantly free yourself from the cultural pressure to be polite. You must realize that absolute dominance requires zero explanations. When you make a decision, it is final. If it offends someone who holds no real leverage over your life, that is their emotional problem to manage, not yours to solve. You are not responsible for regulating the irrational feelings of social parasites. By withholding the explanations they so desperately crave, you protect your energy, you preserve your mystery, and you project a level of self-mastery that most people can only dream of. You stop leaking your power into dead-end interactions. You become a fortress. People will quickly learn that your boundaries are made of iron, and that any attempt to manipulate you through guilt will be met with a cold, blank stare that strips them of their dignity. This is the path of the elite. This is how you command respect without ever asking for it. We have reached the absolute core of this classified briefing. I want you to confront your own history right now. Think about the last time you exhausted yourself trying to explain your point of view to someone who was committed to misunderstanding you. Think about the power you handed them with every word you spoke. Answer this in the comments below. When was the exact moment you realized that your need to be understood was secretly destroying your authority? If this painful truth has finally shattered your illusion of politeness, and you are ready to stop bleeding your status today, drop the words "total control" in the comments right now to prove you are claiming your iron crown. Take back your leverage. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to master the Machiavellian tactics the 1% use to dominate every room they enter. Stay cold, stay silent, and never explain your power.